Genesis 12 and 1. It's a real familiar passage. We're going to walk through it. It says, now the Lord had said, I want you to highlight, had said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land I will show thee. And I will make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and I will curse them that curse thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. Verse number 6 says, and Abram passed through the land unto the place of Sichem, unto the plain of Moreh. And the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared, I want you to highlight that. And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord who appeared unto him. For just a brief title, just for a few moments, the title today is Obedience Over Comfort. Obedience over comfort. Look at somebody and say, obedience over comfort. Say it now. Say it one more time. I need you to get it down in your obedience over comfort. I was trying to ease into it, but I can't. I got to give it to you the way God gave it to me. So we might as well, you can pull your sleeves up, whatever you got. Perry, get another title, get another towel ready. But we ready to go. See, I only got about 15 minutes before somebody gets upset with me this morning because I'm about to be all in somebody in here business. So I want to just go ahead and jump right on in. And I need to tell it like God gave it to me. So I've been trying to pace myself, but I need to go ahead and get it out. So y'all get your notepads, whatever you taking these notes with, because we about to get ready to roll. So I just want to share something with you. This is the thing. We've got to get to a place that we understand that God is here for us. God is calling us to move. God has made promises to us, and God is a God that keeps his promises. It don't matter what it looks like. It don't matter what it smells like. It sounds like. God is not a God that he will lie. And if he said it, then it shall come to pass. Look at somebody and say, God keeps his promises. And see, the thing is, we love to say stuff like this. And Pops, I was just talking to him. I grew up in this time where we would say stuff like, I'm too blessed to be stressed, and I'm too anointed to be disappointed. And some of this stuff, we say, but I'm waiting on God to speak to me. But the truth is, some of us need to get out of our area of comfortability because we're still holding back what God told us to do. And what's happening is God is trying to speak to us, and God is trying to bless us, but we hadn't gotten in the place for God to speak to us yet. And so we love to say stuff like that, and we've heard all this, and we understand that we're gifted, and we understand that we're called in a specific area, but the trouble is we're not willing to be uncomfortable. Just last week we talked about dealing with discomfort. And so sometimes what happens, Pop, I love that you said it, instead of being too blessed to be depressed or too blessed to be stressed, we too comfortable to be obedient. And ain't nobody gonna go buy that bumper sticker. Ain't nobody gonna post that on Facebook. But some of us are too comfortable to be obedient. And we done heard God's voice, and we've been making moves, and we've been doing all this stuff that looks like we're obedient, and it looks like we're walking by faith, but we haven't fully committed to being under what God has commanded. Some of us look like we got it together. I mean, we post Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you post all that stuff, and it looks so good. And you come home and ain't paid your bills yet. Some of us in church with that same facade on, we look like we got it together, but we ain't gotten out of our comfort zone yet to do really what God called us to. And God is calling us to obedience. See, we don't like the word obedience, right? Obey. We don't want it. We don't say that. We say, we got to be a willing vessel and all this stuff. But God is calling us to be obedient to his will, and he will bless us. But some of us are waiting for God to bless us without being obedient. And I'm here today to push you out of your comfort zone a little bit. Because it's time for you to get out of your place of comfort and go do what God called you to. And see, what happens is, if we're not careful, we will insist and we will continue to ask for the promises of God. But we walk around in what we would consider partial obedience. Let me tell you something. Partial obedience is nothing but disobedience. You ever told your kid to do something and they kind of do it? Do you take that as partial obedience? No. The other day, Lex asked one of the children, the rest of them ain't really children, so David, I was trying not to call you out, she had asked David to do something with the trash. And guess what? David did exactly what Lex said. He took the trash bag out of the trash can and sat it right there on the floor. She said, David, I want you to take the trash bag out. And that's exactly what he did. But guess what? It wasn't no trash bag in the can. He didn't take that trash to the outside. And so it was just sitting right there on the floor. And so he kind of did what she said. But you know what she felt like? He didn't do the whole thing. And that's what God is saying to us. God is giving us instruction. We're doing part of the job. But we're not doing the whole thing, y'all. God called you. Ooh, I'm getting ahead of myself. I got to slow down a little bit because I'm going to be out of voice in a minute. So I got to slow down just a little bit. But you got to be careful. And I'm trying to help somebody out. Partial obedience is disobedience. Stop telling people you heard the voice of God, started doing what God said, but stopped. You are still walking in disobedience. If he told you to do it, Tony, then you need to do it. If he told you to do it, Karima, then you need to do it. And you need to do it the way God said do it. We spend a lot of time and effort asking God to bless our partial obedience. So somebody might say, oh, well, the Spirit really moved today because I was obedient to what God showed me needed to happen today. The reason that the things are not happening in your life the way God showed them to you is because you ain't been obedient to them. It got quiet right there. Because we like to say it's a process. And we do have to walk it out. We do have to walk it out. But we got to walk by faith into what God called us to. And some of us ain't walking yet. Look at somebody and say, start walking. No, look at them right and say, start walking. God promised you something, but you ain't started walking toward what he said yet. And so I'm trying to help somebody because sometimes what we do is we settle where it's easy instead of just being obedient. And so it's like you kind of go after what God called you to, but not too much. You kind of join the church, but then you sit in the back on your gift. I feel like I'm talking to somebody in this section over here. I don't know who. You just examine it for yourself. But you kind of step out on faith, but not all the way. You kind of forgive, but you still hold on to some things. So what happens is we try to kind of be obedient. God told us to launch out into the deep. So we kind of start a business plan, but we never really start the business. God told us to forgive, and so you kind of forgive and go back, but you got the same nasty attitude that you had before you left. It will not work until you are obedient. Oh, man. I need you to ask yourself this. I need you to ask yourself, where am I settling right now? Where am I settling? Not where did God call me to be, but where have you settled? You heard the voice of God. God told you what it was going to be. God told you where to go. God told you what to do. But there's somebody in here right now that is settled for a place that God never intended for you to stay for a long period. Where are you settling? And now I need you to write beside that, what did God tell you to do? Because sometimes we will settle in a place and act like it's what God called us to. But God said, I need you to keep going. You started it, but I'm not done with you yet. So you got to keep on moving, Sean. You got to keep moving, Hakeem and Aaron and Deslin. We kind of doing what God said, but kind of obedience is disobedience. What did he say? And so God gave Abram 3 commands, right? He said, get out your country, which is leaving your homeland. He said, from your kindred, so from your cousin, your mama, your uncle, your mama and them. You know, that's anybody outside of everybody else that you kin to. It said, leave your relatives and your extended family. It said, from your father's house. It said, leave your immediate family household. He gave them 3 basic commands to get started. And so what God was telling Abram was, I need you to leave what is familiar, which was his land and his family and his people, and trust God. Some of us in here today need to get out of what's familiar so that we can get into a place where we're completely dependent on God's instruction. You're still in the place of familiarity. You still in that old job that God told you to leave because it's comfortable. You still in that old relationship because it's comfortable to be in. But God is calling you to get out of your comfort zone. And we love to say that kind of stuff. But you got to get out of your comfort zone and be uncomfortable to do what God called you to. Your calling isn't always comfortable. If it's too easy, then you could do it on your own. But God is calling us to a place where we are completely dependent on him. Oh, man, y'all, somebody in here saying yes and people saying amen. And it's time for us to move. We got to get to a place that God called us to. And what happens is, even in the back of your head, somebody is already thinking and processing how you heard the voice of God, but somebody's already processed the but. Look at your neighbor and say, get your butt out the way. No, look, turn to somebody and say, get your butt out the way. You can't do what God said because, right? Yeah, I would do that, but I got a family to take care of. I would come to church, but, I ain't got my life together yet. I would put down my old habits, but my girlfriend ain't saved yet. I would do this, but you got to get your butt out the way. Now, some of y'all would have said the other word, and that's not what the Lord told me to tell y'all to say. So y'all got to be careful, Michelle. But God is calling you to go to another place. And what he did is he said, I want you to get up out of here. I want you to go and I want you to do something new. And I want you to do it in a place that I'm not even going to tell you where it is yet. I want you to trust me enough to just keep walking, to just keep walking until I speak to you. Some of us, after we done walked for a little while, we be like, well, Lord, I know you told me to do this, but I ain't heard from you in a while. So I'm going to just stay right here. And that's what we do. If we ain't heard no instruction, there were periods of time where God didn't speak for 40 years, 400 years. And so what happens, we get caught up because God ain't spoke to us in 3 days. We stop doing what God called us to do. If we ain't heard, you prayed this prayer before. If I don't hear from the Lord by in the morning, I'm going to go ahead and go with the decision that I already made. Anybody ever prayed? No, don't raise your hand. Don't even raise your hand. If you ever pray, like, that's what we do. We put this time limit on God. If I ain't heard from you by 20 minutes from now, Lord, then I'm going to just go ahead and do with what I was already going to do. That's not obedience. And if God gives you something, then you keep doing it until he tells you to stop. If God told you to walk out that door right now and keep walking, and then I'll speak to you, then you keep moving until God tells you to do something different. It's how we get out of season when we try to take God's matters in our own hand. This is not in my notes. I'm going to stick with my notes today. And so here we have Abram, and he's recognized as the father of faith. But even with that title, There were still moments when Abram, instead of being obedient, he fell back on what was comfortable. So who was Abram? Let's look at it. Abram was the son of Terah. And Terah was his father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran was Lot's father. I'm just giving you some insight. They also went to a city of Haran. I don't want you to confuse what we're about to talk about here. But Abram was born and he was raised in a city of Ur. So now, Ur was located in the southern Mesopotamia. And this was a wealthy and advanced area. It was booming in trade. It had massive wealth. They were known for farming, craftsmanship. They had big houses, kind of like, in your neighborhood, Tafana, kind of over there where you live. And so people in Ur, they lived in these walled homes. They had running water. Back in the day, they had running water systems. And they were a part of this organized government. So it wasn't like Abraham exactly came from the other side of the tracks. So Abraham, it wasn't that God was telling him to leave because he was struggling. God was calling Abraham to leave so that he wouldn't be familiar. And some of us got to get out of the place that we're familiar with so that we can go to another area and trust in God. But the problem with Ur was spiritually corrupt. And this was a city that was deeply pagan, and they worshiped idol gods, especially the moon god. So God needed to move Abram out of where he was to start another place where they will worship the true and living God. Some of you need to leave the place that you've been in for so long because there's some bad habits that were there. There's some trauma that was there. There were some situations that were there that God is calling you that you need to get out of. There was some witchcraft that was there. There was some, I almost said it was some hoeing over there. There was some cheating. I need to say promiscuity. Promiscuity is the word. But you came out of some situations that you need to get out of because God wants to create in you something new. But what happens is we're familiar with that place, so we try to reside in that same place as long as we can. But at some point, my son, he's going to move out because God is going to do something new in him. At some point, my daughter's got to go because God is going to do something new in him. And they've got to go start something new. And they got to leave my house behind and go do what God called them to. And they're going to have to start their own traditions. They're going to have to start their own vacations. They're going to have to start their own relationships. And so what they got to do that, they have to come out of the house that they're in so God can build something new inside of them. The reason why God can't do something new inside of us because we're so caught up staying in that old familiar place that we've been in for a long time. You asking God to bless the old place, he's telling you, you need to get out. Look at somebody say it's time to go. Genesis 12:1, it says, now the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show you. So for Abram, leaving Ur meant giving up a secure and predictable life. It meant giving up what he knew. It meant leaving his family behind. But in order for that, he had to be obedient. And in order to be obedient, it means he had to leave the old stuff behind. Look at somebody say, you got to leave it behind. Sometimes God is telling you to leave, and it's not because you're bad, but it's because back there you picked up some bad habits. It's because you're familiar. It's because back there is chaos. It's because back there are issues that are unresolved, and so you can't thrive in that old place. You need to leave some of those things behind so that God can do something new. But what we begin to do as Christians, we want the promises, but we want to hold on to the past. So God, some of us need to leave our old city. Some of us need to leave our old relationship. Some of y'all need to leave them goals back in 2024. Your 2024 goals shouldn't just be the same 2025 goals. You need to leave some of that stuff behind. You need to leave that man and that woman that you've been dating in the past. You need to leave that old mindset. You need to leave that sin behind. Some of us want to be the promises of God, but we don't want to leave the sin alone. We want to keep sinning, and we want to get as close to sin as we can get just so we can say, well, is this a sin or is this not a sin? And we like to say, where is the line? You need to leave this. Look at somebody and say, leave that sin behind. Now, you got to look at a sinner. Look at somebody that's a sinner for real and say, leave that sin in behind. I was just trying to see who y'all was looking at, because we was going to have an altar call. Y'all, I love the Lord, I promise. But in order for you to move into the place that God calls you, you got to leave stuff behind. Stop dragging your old self with you into what God called you to. And see, where we mess up is we try to settle in the middle. We know God called us over there, so we stop right here. Because this is better than what we came out of, but it ain't what God called you to. And this is what Abram did. So let's look at it. So this was not the first time that God told Abram to get out of his country. Y'all, we were studying this at 1 o'clock this morning. This wasn't the first time he told him to leave. And so what happened, God reiterated it in Genesis 12, but he said it to him. We about to look at it. Let's go. Acts 7. Acts 7, 2 and 3. Now, this is Stephen, who's a deacon. At this time, he's delivering a message. He's speaking, and he's been accused of blasphemy. This is in Acts 7, 2 and 3. So Stephen is speaking to the Jewish leaders. He's speaking again to the Sanhedrin, to this council that's got him on trial. And what he's doing is he's retelling how God called Abraham. And so what it says, and he said, men, brethren, and fathers, hearken. The God of glory appeared unto Father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Sharon. Now, Sharon is just the name of Haran, which was the place that he had moved to. It's just the Hebrew name for it, the Greek name for it, sorry. And said unto him, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred, and come into the land which I will show you. Okay, so let me show you what Moses did after that. And Abram did exactly what we do. You know what we do? We start moving a little bit, but we don't go all the way to what God called us. So now let's go to Genesis 11 and 31. And I'll give you a second. I know you're turning and I know you're writing. Genesis 11, 31. So now God has told Abram, I need you to get out of your city, because in this place he's in Ur. So what does Abram do? Abram, in Genesis 11:31, it says, and Terah, now this is Abram's father. It says, and Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. It says, and they came unto Haran and dwelt there. So what does this mean? What this means is that God told Abram that I want you to get out of your country. Now, he said this in Acts. What did Abram do, though? Abram left Ur, but he didn't go to Canaan. Abram left Ur and stayed in Haran. And so what happened is Haran was a place that was very similar to Ur. And so what it symbolizes and what it shows us is that instead of us being completely dependent on God, what we do is we move to places that are still similar to what we came out of. It's like we're trying to be dependent on him, but we still want to depend on what we knew. So we're not completely dependent. We're going to a place that ends up being familiar. Let me tell you how it happens. You get out of a relationship. You say, I'm going to date somebody new. I want to do a new thing. And you go back and date the same kind of guy that you just got out of a relationship with, because it's what's familiar to you. You say, I want to change my career. I want a new job. God called me to do something else. But what you end up doing is settling for the same kind of job that you just came out of, because it's what's familiar and what's on your resume. But God is saying, I need you to go to a place, and I don't want you to stop until I show it to you. But Abram decided, I'm going to stop just a little bit outside of what I was originally doing. And it's oftentimes what we do as Christians. We move a little bit, but we won't go completely into what God called us to do. We'll start being obedient, but when stuff starts looking like it's going to get a little fuzzy over there, I'm going to stop right here till God makes it clearer. God is waiting on you to be completely obedient and dependent on him. Some of us are wondering why the doors haven't opened yet, because we haven't been obedient. So Genesis 12, it then says, now the Lord had said unto Abram, get out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show you. See, what happens, we look like we've stepped out on faith sometimes, but we really just went to another place that's familiar. And sometimes what God is saying is, I need you to leave everything that you formerly knew so that you can completely depend on me. The problem is, it's not that we don't believe God can do it. It's that we don't believe God can do it with us. And so they stopped in Haran. And see, Haran was very similar to Ur. Haran was a busy hub with key trade routes between the Mesopotamia. It was prosperous. And in that same place, they worshiped the same gods. They worshiped pagan gods, and God was calling Abram to go to a place so that they could serve the true and living God. And what God is calling you to do is stop trusting what you already know and trust in him. And what we do is we settle for safety instead of being dependent on him. Comfort over obedience is how we act. But God is calling for our obedience over our comfort. So God wasn't just taking Abraham from a place. He was taking Abram from a corrupt system. And y'all ever heard the saying, you can take the man out the hood, but you can't take the hood out of the man. So in this case, you could take Abram out of Ur, but you couldn't take Ur out of Abram. Because it's what he knew, it's what he was familiar with. And so God was saying, I need you to move. Anybody want to know how to move? Well, let's keep going. I can hear all these old sayings. And so God wants us to move to a new place. But in order to do that, we got to be willing to be uncomfortable. Who's ready to be uncomfortable to get the promises of God? Who's willing to be uncomfortable to go after what? Some of y'all kind of like, well, I don't know. It depends on what God tell me to do. Some of y'all kind of got y'all hands up. Yeah, look, some of it, I said, well, put your hand. Y'all said, well, it all depends. I don't know what I'm giving up. And what happened? Oh, that's so, because what happens is we wait to see what God is going to tell us to give up before we decide if we're going to follow him. Do I have to give up my salary? Oh, no, I ain't ready to do that. You know why? Because I got a family. But the Bible says God will provide all our needs according to his riches and glory. But I need to keep my job because I got this house over here. Woo! But God is saying, I need you to be dependent. Oh, y'all, I'm going to move in a second. I'm trying to get all the way to the bottom. When I get there, we good. But somebody is still holding on to what you know. It ain't your salary. It's not your wealth. It's not your mind. It's not your degree. But it's God that is supplying all your needs. So why not be dependent on him? I told Lex a long time ago. See, Lex came from that good side of the tracks like Abram did. I grew up on Pearl Street. It wasn't no big houses with walls on Pearl Street, I can tell you that. And so I told her a long time ago, money don't matter to me because I didn't have it. I was dependent on God when I didn't have none, and I'm going to be dependent on God when I get a couple of dollars. Some of us are dependent on what we feel like we use to get what we got, so we won't let it go to get what God has for us, but he gave it to you in the first place. I feel like I needed a keyboard right there. If I had a keyboard right there, I could have gone with it. Y'all would have been out. Y'all blame it on Hakeem. No, don't move now. Sit on back now, Hakeem. No, don't try to rush me now. I needed you a minute ago. No. Oh, man, that's so good. Y'all, God is so good. I'm gonna skip down a little bit in my notes. But see, here's the thing. This ain't the only time that Abram did it. Let me show you. I got to show you. I got to show y'all this stuff. Abram did it again when he got into Canaan. And Abram went to Egypt. I gotta give you this stuff. Let's look at verse 10. Verse number 10. Oh, man, it's crazy. Abram, he was known as the father of faith, but he oftentimes fell back into what was comfortable. And it's a process. It's kind of like, God updates our GPS. We follow it a little bit, but if GPS don't speak for long, you pull over to the side of the road. You be like, I don't know if this is an update. When you really should keep moving until God tells you to do something different. So look at verse 10. It says, and there was a famine. Now Abram at this point has gone into Canaan. And he's gone into Canaan, but what happens in verse 10, it says, and there was a famine in the land of Canaan, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. God never told Abram to go to Egypt. Abram went to Egypt on his own, because Egypt was very similar to and Haran. So God wanted him in Canaan so he could be completely dependent on him. But Abram said, I'm going to go back to a place that I'm familiar with because it's a famine right now, and this is what I know. So I'm not quite sure if I'm going to completely depend on God. And so when he got to Egypt, then he had to tell a half-truth and tell them to tell Pharaoh that you my sister to Sarah, who was his wife. What happens is when we get out of the God's will, we got to make up a plan for ourselves. When it gets hard, we want to find another place, another job, another relationship, or another situation that was closer to the one that we came out of. Because it's what we're familiar with. It's why we end up living where we live. It's why we end up getting the job. You heard God tell you to go do something that he ain't never shown nobody else before. But because it's uncomfortable, you go back to what you're familiar with. If God called you to get out of banking, then get out of banking. Stop depending on your knowledge of banking to supply your needs when it's God that's supplying your needs. Oh. So then when he got out of the will of God, he had to tell some half-truths. But do you know what happened? God still blessed him because he made Abram a promise. God's promises will last, y'all. His promise to me is worth more than money. God's promise to me is worth more than what somebody can guarantee me. Because it's him that's supplying my needs according to his riches. So it don't matter what the doctors say. It don't matter what my mama say. God's promises are what I'm standing on. All this sounds good until you go through a famine. Y'all amen and shouting. Go home and let nothing be in your refrigerator. Somebody going back to their job that was on their resume. Me and Eddie got a joke because we've got seasonal businesses. And in the off season, it get cold. And so every once in a while, me and Eddie be like, man, this was a cold winter. But you got to be obedient. You can't let your circumstances deter what God called you to. So here's the thing. What happens when we settle for comfort instead of obedience to God? What happens? Genesis 12:1, it says, now the Lord had said unto Abram, get out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show you. Here's the thing that you've got to recognize when you're choosing comfort over obedience. This is going to be long, so I need you to, we might need to put this up, Coop, if we can. Stop expecting God to bless anything less than obedience. Stop expecting God to bless anything less than obedience. I'm going to say it one more time for those in the back. Stop expecting God to bless anything less than obedience. Sometimes we trying to figure out while we're struggling and we're listening to the voice of God, it's because some of us aren't being obedient to what God said. I understand trials come to make you stronger, but the first thing you got to look at, am I doing what God called me to do? We get in trouble when we don't listen to our Father. We tell our kids this all the time. When you don't tell us everything and when you don't listen to us, you run the risk of getting in trouble. We get in trouble when we don't follow what God said. And then what we do is instead of following the voice of God, we start asking God to bless where we are. Some of you need to stop, and me too, asking God to bless where we are and go where God told us to go. See, somebody might say, I haven't been disobedient. You need to stop expecting God to bless where you settled in. God told you to do it. You started doing it. It ain't been blessed by your measure yet. Then you need to go back to doing what he said. He never told him to stay in Haran. He never told him to stay in Egypt. If God called you to a place, then your mission, your goal needs to be to follow the voice of God. So many times what we want, when stuff gets uncomfortable, we go back to that familiar place. It's how we go back to these old, I don't know who I'm talking to, but it's how you go back to these old relationships. It's how you get back in these same situationships that you were in before, because it's what's comfortable for us. It's how you end up in the same career, even though God called you to change it, because it's what is familiar. God has spoke to us 11 times, and we still dependent on what we can do instead of what he wants to do in us. And you got to ask yourself, what did God say? Let's keep going. We got to stop depending on the place that we recognize. And we got to go after what God said, y'all. Let's keep going. We'll keep going. We'll keep going. We're almost done. Verse number 2, it says, and I will make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless those that bless thee, and I will curse him that curse thee. And in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Point number 2, we've already covered it. But your blessings are tied to your obedience. Your blessings are tied to your obedience. So often we want God to bless our partial obedience. But if God said it, then that's what you got to go after. And point number 3, let's look at verse 5. It says, and Abram took Sarai's wife and Lot his brother's son and all their substance that they had gathered and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan. And into the land of Canaan they came. And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Sichem and unto the plain of Moreh. And the Canaanite was in the land. Right here, this might be too big. Stop worrying about who else is in the land that God called you to. It says, and the Canaanite was in the land. There were people already in the area that God told him to go inhabit. Stop worrying about who's where God called you to be. If it's for you, if God said it to you, then that's what you go after. Amen. It's verse number 7. It says, and the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, unto thy seed will I give this land, and there builded he an altar on the land who appeared unto him. This is the thing I need you to understand. Point number 3 is God didn't speak or didn't appear until Abram was obedient. Some of us are waiting and looking for the voice of God, but we're still operating in disobedience. Some of us stop at verse 2. Verse number 2 says, I will make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and I will make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And we never make it down to verse number 7, when God actually appeared unto Abram and told him that this is the land that he wanted him to inhabit. We can't expect God to appear to us if we're not obedient. Somebody stand to your feet. As I've been praying, y'all, I've been praying for the blessings of God for God's people. But with that comes our obedience. And sometimes we expect what we haven't sown into. You know, sometimes when your children, they ask you for stuff, they ask you for McDonald's. You know what you say? You got McDonald's money? They be like, hey, can we go to this place? And you be like, you ain't gave. You haven't sown into where we're supposed to be going. What God is asking us to sow, though, it's not physical. It's our obedience. So we're asking God for McDonald's money, but we ain't been obedient. We can't continue to expect the blessings of God without giving up the past, y'all. There are areas in our life that are so familiar to us, that sin that we're holding on to, the relationships that we're still holding on to, that God has said, I want you to get out of that land to a place that I will show you. Some of us are rushing into relationships that we ought not be in. And God is saying, I'm trying to build you, but you're trying so hard to build with somebody else. But God has got to build you first.